Well, hello, and welcome back to our verse-by-verse study of 1 Peter. And we'll be continuing on today in chapter 3, verses 8 through 12. Now, as you recall, last time we met, we left off with Peter really instructing husbands and wives on how they should relate to each other. And in today's passage, Peter now moves to the principles for our attitudes and actions, and then he gives us an exhortation from the Psalms. So let us go ahead and read 1 Peter 3, verses 8 through 12. It says, "Finally, all of you who have unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble mind, do not repay evil for evil or reviling for reviling. But on the contrary, bless, for to this you were called, that you may obtain a blessing. For now the exhortation from Psalm 34. Whoever desires to love life and see good days, let him keep his tongue from evil, and his lips from speaking deceit. Let him turn away from evil and do good. Let him seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil." Now, as we start to take a look at our then principles, it starts off with Peter saying, "Finally," as if he was kind of reaching a climax. But really what he was doing was not ending his epistle, right? But he was just changing or shifting gears from how, we should relate as groups of people, now talking to how we should relate really as the whole church, as the Christian community altogether. And you see in verses 8 and 9, Peter really gives kind of a good summary of the ethical and spiritual qualities that are required of members of the church. Now, this isn't meant to be an all-inclusive list, that if you do these things, then you're in the club. Now, this was just kind of meant as, hey, this is the way we should be acting. These are our attitudes that we should have. Now, in verse 8, he gives really relational characteristics, how we should relate to each other inside that church. Kind of a pattern of Christian integrity, right? And he starts off with that we should have unity of mind. Now, really, we all want to have people think the same way we think. As long as it's the way we think, then we're good with it being unity of mind. But really what Peter's talking about here is to be of one mind with Christ, the unity of Christ's mind. We need to think like Christ, not really how we think. Then he goes on to say really that we should have sympathy and brotherly love and a tender heart. Right? So among people, among God's people, this is the way we should, we should have that compassion, and we should think brotherly and have a tender heart towards those other people, particularly Christians, but to everyone. Then in verse 9 he goes on to say, don't repay evil for evil or reviling for reviling, but rather give a blessing. Now, this has always become almost a funny joke between Julie and I when we're on the road and somebody cuts us off or does something really stupid. We always say, well, we shouldn't curse that guy. He just needs a blessing. But really, that's what God wants us, right? He will take care of repayment. We need to just bless people and not really sink down to their level. Then Peter goes on, like I said, in giving us an exhortation on how to live from Psalm 34. Now, as you recall, Peter already quoted Psalm 34 back in chapter 2. And generally speaking, doing good is really pretty difficult, right? And that's what he's kind of saying here. Doing good is kind of difficult because evil gets immediate results. But the reality is when we do good, our payback will come. And it'll be much longer lasting. And it'll be much better than those who do evil and get an immediate payment on it. So we see really as an always principle. I think the always principle we start to see here that Peter's going to be developing is that much like Jesus, right? Peter's not promising a rose garden, right? Things are not always going to be great when we follow Jesus. Right? We're going to have criticism, we're going to have opposition from all different types of people. But the reality is that should we live a godly life and we bless other people when others are cursing at us, then we will be rewarded in heaven. So now, tell me, what are your now principles? How is this passage speaking to you today? How is it opening your heart? What's God telling you through the pen of Peter because of this? Let me know. Leave a comment. Send a message. I always look forward to them. I always enjoy knowing that people were watching. And now come back on Wednesday as we continue our verse-by-verse study in 1 Peter, coming up on some of my favorite verses since my last favorite verses in 1 Peter. So again, please come back. And until then, be safe, go with God's grace, and go with the peace that only He could provide. Amen.